I can imagine somebody, imagine somebody like hanging off a cliff, like holding a rope, like just hanging on by a thread, and coming up and saying, "Oh, sorry, buddy, I found out that rescuing's a bad thing. Bye." Like, hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, come and join the conversation in our Facebook group.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
Look at us. Shapes episode number 4. Like, given how long it took us to get to this point, I was like, are we going to derail midway through this?
Shapes episode number 4 out of how many, Claire?
Well, it was going to be 8. And then last week, we kind of created a new shape. So probably 9, maybe 10. Who knows?
That was, I mean, if you listen back 3 episodes ago, that was my, that was my guess. So I just wanted everybody to know at what point the new episode got added, and we're at least at 9. So stay tuned. Who knows what we're in for? Good content, though.
Yes. Serena is living her full I told you so fantasy right now. Like, I mean, fair. Like, when she said it, I was like, no, we've had these shapes for ages. We're not going to add more. Mm-hmm. I love that I always convince myself of that. Oh, well. Yeah. And here we are. But the good thing is we're going to be we're nearly halfway through where we thought we were initially going to do. So, not sure how that's a good thing, but anyway, so today we're basically going to look back on the last 3 episodes and start talking about the drama triangle and the dynamics involved in that. One of the most important things for us to focus on is why the rescuer approach is so harmful. That's like the big thing that we really want to be talking about today, but we're going to look at lots of different other things as well. Just now that you understand what we're talking about when we say victim, persecutor, rescuer, or more importantly, victim approach, persecutor approach, rescuer approach. Now we can talk about it with you having that kind of understanding of what those things are about. But in case you haven't listened to those episodes, what are you doing? Go back and listen to them right now, because it's going to make way more sense if you've heard them before. But what we're going to do is we're just going to do a little reminder at the beginning. And it's important to say we are repeating a lot and reminding you a lot in these episodes, but that's because for a lot of people, this is going to be brand new information. And through reminding you of like the key pieces of these dynamics and these shapes, you're more likely to remember them. So that's the reason that we're kind of doing these little reviews at the beginning of each of the episodes. So
it's going to be a giggly episode. I can just tell.
Cool. Okay. I'm just like, do I need to pause so we can bring everyone else in on the giggle? Or we're just going to giggle. That's fine.
No, I'm good.
So as we've said previously, the reason that these shapes are so important is because it's really important for us to understand whether the way that we're meeting our needs is empowering or disempowering. And while we might be aware of some of the ways that are disempowering, the example we've used in previous episodes is like people who smoke to feel calm, but being aware that there are negative impacts to smoking and vaping, those sorts of things. But there are a lot of ways that are meeting our needs that are disempowering that we aren't currently aware of. So as we know, Dr. Cartman came up with this model called the drama triangle, and we use his shape as the basis, but our descriptions are much more in depth. They're obviously provided in the needs context, unsurprisingly, and also I think it's really important for us to understand that what we're talking about here is the approaches that people are taking in these situations. So when we're talking about the disempowerment dynamic, when we're talking about the drama triangle, we refer to the victim approach, the persecutor approach, and the rescuer approach. And the reason for this is that what we don't want to do is have the approach somebody's taking in a situation to be confused or conflated with what is actually happening, like from an objective standpoint. And when the original model is applied with the original descriptors, which are just the victim, persecutor, and rescuer, it often conflates actual objective harm and victimhood, and those like relative positions within it, with the mentalities or approaches that people can connect to in order to address the situational circumstances that they're in, which may or may not be related to actual harm and victimhood. And this is not only unhelpful, but it actually often leads to victim blaming, because it focuses on the mindsets or behaviors of someone who is an objective victim, rather than focusing on the responsibility, behaviors, and choices of the person who've harmed them. Spoiler alert, this is what the new shape that we've just created is about. So we'll get to that a little bit later. And what it means is it can often prevent finding an appropriate pathway to accountability, healing, and justice in the instances where there are objective harm and victimhood. And it's important to remember that each one of these approaches, the victim approach, persecutor approach, and rescuer approach, all have chronically unmet needs, i.e. they've unmet needs over a sustained period of time. They are a victim approach at core, i.e. they're a victim approach first and foremost. The core feeling tends to be anxiety or anxiety related, and the focus tends to be on the problems in the situation.
And another reminder, when it comes to the empowering ways to meet our needs, we tend to have an idea of ways to meet our needs that are empowering. But there are a lot of ways of us meeting our needs that are empowering that we aren't currently aware of. So to help us understand this better, we use the universal needs empowerment ecosystem, as this is almost always the root of the ways that we meet needs that are empowering. All the positions in the empowerment ecosystem exist within the context of community, and the three positions within the ecosystem are the creator approach, the supporter approach, and the contributor approach. All positions in the empowerment ecosystem have consistently met needs, are a creator at core. The core feeling is want. What do they want more of? And their focus is on their outcomes. So in order to be able to move from disempowering to empowering, we need to be able to identify where we are in the disempowering and know how to move to where we want to be, the empowering. This is why we first focus on the disempowering, so that you can learn to spot these patterns both in yourself and others. And then we cover the empowering, so you can then learn how to move between the two.
And so, because we're going to be focusing so much on the rescuer approach in this episode, we're going to do just a quick reminder and review of what the rescuer approach is specifically. And it's important to remember, as I said, the rescuer approach is first and foremost a victim approach, and it's interestingly enough, the rescuer approach behaviors are victim approach behaviors, because we're basically using one to try and avoid feeling like we're in the other. And so it's often a way of kind of masking and avoiding the feeling of being in the being in the victim approach by going, no, look over here, I'm a rescuer, really. Da, 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 da. And it's like, yeah, but are you though?
Look at my cape.
Yeah. Yes, it's fancy. I had it pressed and everything. So what is the rescuer approach? So the rescuer approach intervenes on behalf of the victim approach. They try to protect the person who's in the victim approach from the persecutor approach. They believe they have to get involved because they see the person in the victim approach as powerless to affect change. They appear to alleviate the person in the victim approach's fear or negative feelings, but this happens by cultivating a dependency on the rescuer. They try to fix either the person or the situation for the person in the victim approach to try to feel good about themselves. They're often perceived as the hero or helper, and they can genuinely have the intention to help. Keyword there, intention to help. But they often reinforce the disempowerment of the person in the victim approach by reinforcing this perception of powerless. They need, consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, to look after others, to feel good about themselves. And these are basically red ways of trying to meet their own unmet needs or to mask them. They often unconsciously need the person in the victim approach to rescue to bolster their own self-esteem, or as a red way to try to meet their own needs or to mask them, because inwardly they are in a victim approach and feel powerless to affect change in their own lives. They can be a person or something that's being used to rescue the person from their situation to make them feel temporarily better, but then fostering dependency. And if it's not a person, it's often still perceived this way by the person in the victim approach.
The primary characteristics of somebody who's in the victim approach are they try to rescue the victim from the persecutor. They're perceived as the helper. They use helping the victim to feel good about themselves. They reinforce the victim's disempowerment, and they create a dependency. People use so many things to rescue them from their persecutors. Some examples are smoking, work, drinking, drugs, food, gambling, sweets, social media, exercise, shopping, porn, TV. This creates a dependency. Therefore, the rescuer approach often becomes the new persecutor approach. See how that happened? The rescuer approach summary is, at its core, it's a victim. It's a victim approach. It intervenes on behalf of the victim. It's perceived as a helper and can have a genuine intention to help. As Claire said, the key word there is intention. They reinforce
if you don't know why it's a problem, go back and listen to the episode that we did on why your intention really doesn't matter. We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yes. Big, small word, big, I don't want to say consequence, but big impact in especially the needs work. So they reinforce the disempowerment of the victim. It believes and reinforces the belief that the victim is powerless to affect change. This approach creates dependency. The core feelings are anxiety. They need to rescue the victim to feel enough, so they let's try that one again. They need to rescue the victim to feel enough, so they are attached to the outcome. They take responsibility for the victim, which further disempowers the victim, and they rescue to avoid being in the victim approach or to feel better about themselves.
Right. So why is the rescue approach so harmful? Now, the interesting thing is that every position in the drama triangle is a victim approach at core. A lot of the time, the rescue approach is viewed as being the quote unquote better option for people to be in, as it's viewed as being helpful, supportive, selfless. But as we know, unless our needs are consistently and effectively met, there are often unconscious hidden motivations for the quote unquote selfless strategy being used, which are about meeting our own unmet needs. And if you don't know what we're talking about here, go back and listen to the episode about being self-first, where we talk about the difference between selfish, selfless, and self-first. If you think that selfless is a good thing, please go and listen to that episode, because a lot of the time being selfless in the way that we do it in our culture and in our society actually isn't a good thing. The only way to really be in a constructive place is to have a self-first approach to meeting our own needs. But not only that, but the rescue approach can be very harmful to the person in the victim approach position. Quick trigger warning, we're going to talk about domestic abuse. And interestingly enough, I think I've shared about this on a previous podcast episode. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who works in family law years ago. We were just out for dinner, and it was interesting. We hadn't really talked a lot about my work prior to this point, and I'm not really sure that this friend even knew what I did, really. I don't even know how the topic came up, but we were talking about the victim persecutor rescuer. And they're like, oh my God, I literally just learned about this in a course that she'd done. She'd been to a conference and had done this course, especially looking at how people who are in family law should help people who are victims of domestic violence. And this is and so this is what we're talking about here. So if we're talking about domestic abuse or domestic violence situation, it's important to note first and foremost that this is a situation which there is an objective victim. There is objective harm being done, and there is an objective harmer. So the abuser is somebody who is actually doing harm to the other person. And we use it as an example because it's one in which these kind of positions of harm are really obvious and can be seen and can be easily identified. Now, this is not a situation which these are approaches. This is a situation which there's objective, victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And I'm going to use these terms for the moment because we haven't told you what the new model is and the new shape that we're about to share. But just so that you, and this is one of the reasons that we needed to come up with a new model to explain what is happening when harm is being done. Because when you use the same terminology, both for when harm is being done and when an approach is being taken, the two end up getting muddled in together. So, but the kind of dynamic in this situation is very similar as it would be if we're talking about victim approach, persecutor, and rescue approach, which is why it can be helpful to understand why the rescue approach is so harmful. So when you understand the dynamic and how these things impact everybody within that dynamic, it helps to understand that when we're using these approaches, why those approaches are so harmful. So a lot of the time in these sort of situations, other people, friends, colleagues, attorneys, people who are in family law, see where the link is coming in with my friend here, they can see the dynamic that is playing out and they want to help the person being abused in getting out of that dynamic. And what they don't realize is part of the abuse is that the victim is experiencing has to do with the person who is doing the abuse having control, making all the decisions, telling the victim what they can, can't, should, or have to do. The victim is currently disempowered because the person who is persecuting them or harming them has taken the power and control in the dynamic. And the person in the victim position has their ability to choose for themselves taken away from themselves, either through force or through manipulation or through coercive control. If you don't understand what those are, we're actually going to do an episode coming up in the future about coercive control, because it is such a it's a lot of the time it's a way of where you're controlling somebody through more subtle means, a lot of the time, because you have the power to determine whether or not their needs are going to get met or harmed. And that's one of the reasons that coercive control is so insidious, because it's something where on the surface, I'm not telling you have to do this, or I'm not telling you have to not do that, but I'm going to make it very clear that you are going to suffer consequences to your needs if you do this or don't do this. If you do the thing that I don't want you to do, or you don't do the thing I don't want you to do. So, anybody who's looking from the outside in on this situation can see what is happening. Who is still connected to their humanity is going to feel for the person who is being abused in this situation. Now, the challenge is that what can sometimes happen is that well-meaning rescuers can come into the situation and take over the decision-making process for the person who is being victimized in the situation, quote unquote, for their own good. They tell the victim what to do, where to go, how to make it happen, etc., all in an attempt to get them out of the harmful situation that they are in. What they don't realize is that they're keeping that person in the victim approach position by taking the power of decision-making control on themselves, rather than supporting the victim in making decisions and taking the actions that feel right for them. They also often unconsciously get the victim to transfer dependency from the current person who is abusing them to themselves, because they reinforce this perceived powerlessness of the victim by doing everything for them, which reinforces this belief that they can't do it for themselves. And in the short term, this may not seem harmful. It may seem like the better option to try to get them out of a harmful situation. But what it does is it reinforces this perceived powerlessness of the person being victimized and continues to take the power of choice and control out of their hands and create dependency on the rescuer. And these factors automatically put the person who was trying to help, that they came in with the rescuer approach, like, oh, look, I'm trying to help here. But because they were taking the rescuer approach and because of how they were approaching the situation, they are now going to be in the persecutor approach, as they've taken the power and control and choice over the person who's being victimized. To truly help the victim and avoid unintentionally becoming that persecutor approach, it is important that they support them in making the decisions and the action that the person who is being victimized themselves believes is right for them. It's about helping them to remember, reconnect to, and act from their own personal power by reclaiming the power to make their own choices and act on them. It's about supporting their own self-empowerment by removing their dependency on others, often primarily by supporting them in the process of learning how to meet their own needs. Now, it's important to say this is an extreme example, but the dynamic often plays out the same way for any rescue approach. And it's also a slightly confusing example because, as I said, we're kind of, there's this kind of blurring of the lines between where is the actual victim and the actual harm being done, and where are the approaches in this situation. But that dynamic is very much the same no matter what. And we are going to come, as I said, in episode 9 of this series, we are going to share with you a model and a shape to help you understand what is actually happening in that situation, where the harm is, where the responsibility is. And then we'll teach you how to layer on top of it. Okay, well, where are the drama triangle positions when within the context of actual harm being done? Where are the empowerment ecosystems positioned in the context of actual harm being done? And this is the reason that when I started having this conversation with this friend of mine over dinner, she was like, oh, I get this now, because literally this was part of their training as a family, as a person who deals in family law. This was part of their training on how to deal with domestic violence and domestic abuse situations, because so many attorneys and lawyers and you're in the UK solicitors come in going, okay, they see the situation and they're like, oh, we've got to get you out of this situation. So you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to not do this, you need to not do this. Here's how you're going to go about doing it. And what they do is they give instructions to the person who is in that victim position. And that victim position then they've gone from one person controlling all of their decisions to another person controlling all of those decisions. And while there might be a good intention, and it's like, well, no, I'm doing this to get them out of a harmful situation, that inevitably ends up becoming the person where they now have the control and power over the person in that victim approach. And that ends up keeping them in a victim approach with respect to how they're feeling. Because what a lot of the time happens is that when somebody is objectively victimized enough, it can end up then pushing them into that victim approach position, because that's when they feel powerless. Somebody else has control over them. And so because we haven't been taught about these things, we haven't been taught there's an empowered way to deal with being objectively victimized, and we haven't been taught about the empowerment ecosystem, we don't know there's another way of doing it. And so we kind of are in this place of like, oh, I can't really, like, there's nothing I can do. And then when somebody else comes in to try to fix it, it's like, oh, someone's coming in to fix it for me. Oh, yay, that's better than somebody who's like having this like crappy control over me. But then you end up in a position where you're like, I still don't have any power. I still feel powerless to do anything. So you're not actually helping with the empowerment of the person who is being harmed in this situation. So when we get to the end of this whole series, all of these things will make a lot more sense. But it's really important to understand that irrespective of whether we're talking about an objective harm being done, or whether we're just talking about three people who are just taking these approaches, inevitably the person who comes in with the rescue approach will end up becoming a persecutor approach because of how the rescue approach approaches things.
Well, and wouldn't you say that because there's often good intent with the rescuer approach, somebody's trying to do it most of the time unknowingly to meet their own needs, but they're doing it more to help the other person in their situation. And
I would say most of the time they have themselves convinced that they're trying to do it more to help the other person.
Fair enough.
Majority of the time, people, the reason they're doing it more than anything is because they want to feel good about themselves. And they've convinced themselves it's about the other person, and they're doing this to help the other person, because that's the way that they can retain this good kind of self-image of like, oh yes, look at me, I'm a good person, not look at me, I'm using this poor person to try and get my own needs met. Like, that's a subconscious thing that happens, but that is the driving force the vast majority of the time when somebody's in the rescue approach. Sorry, I jumped in the middle bit.
That's okay. No, that was an important jump in. I'm not sure if the rest of what I'm going to say actually still fits anymore, but we're gonna try it out.
Let's see.
Like, we'll just either leave it or pick it up and walk with it. So the intent of somebody in the victim that's coming from the victim approach, everything that Claire said still.
Do you mean victim approach or do you mean rescue approach?
I do mean victim approach.
Okay.
Like, the intent is to I'm going to say it as it's in my head, and then you can decipher it for me. The intent of somebody in the victim approach, when there is a rescuer approach person coming at them or trying to assist them, is I want to let them help because my situation is so bad, and I'm already feeling like, I feel like all these good intentions from like the positions, like it really, really, really goes to show that like the impact goes so much deeper than good intent. Like, and this is one of those places where it's really come to like my consciousness of like, I'm trying to do a good thing, or I'm trying to, like, I found myself in the victim approach many times when I start realizing I'm like, oh, and I'm letting them help me, and I'm letting, fuck, look where I am. And then I gotta do my things to switch shapes.
So here's the thing, is that, so I'm going to come back to the whole, if you're on the victim approach and like you're wanting them to, the intent is for them to help you. We'll get back to that in a second. But I just want to jump in on what you've just said. And because this is going to start to help people understand a little bit more about how quickly people ping around this triangle. So you're in the victim approach and somebody comes in to rescue you, and you say to yourself, oh, I'm helping them because I'm letting them rescue me. Ping! Like, you've switched, like you're now trying to rescue them from their victim approach because you're trying to make them feel good about themselves. And because they are now dependent on you to feel good about themselves, ping, you're all of a sudden in the persecutor approach because they're dependent on you for getting their needs met. And now the interesting thing is, from their perspective, they're like, oh, let me come in and help this poor person who needs me to come in and help them so I can feel good about myself. Ping, all of a sudden they're over in the persecutor approach because now you're dependent on them to get your needs met. This is why this is all so fucking messy. Like, this is like this is the hot mess triangle. Like, this is a mess on mess on mess, because moment by moment, it gets messier and messier and messier, and the lines blur, and nobody's quite sure what's going on, other than everyone's got good intention and everybody is causing harm, like, without intending to.
You were talking about in the last, I think it was the last episode, like, you thought quicksand was going to be a much bigger problem than it was in your adult life. You know, the Bermuda Triangle. I always thought that was something that you're going to get sucked into. Like that was a huge thing growing up. Like, maybe this is the Bermuda Triangle. We've all been sucked into this fucked up, like, way. Like, it kind of is, because if you get into it, like, if you're not aware of it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a good chance you're in it and not even aware. Like if you're not aware of the triangle, there's a good chance you're in it and not even aware of it. Like,
right, absolutely. Maybe we should reach out to the makers of cartoons and have them like the whole quicksand thing. That's not a thing. You know, the Bermuda Triangle, that's not a thing. The drama triangle, can we get that put into cartoons so the kids are aware? This is a danger they need to be aware of, that they have to avoid at all costs in their adult lives. I mean, legit. Yes.
You're not wrong. I mean,
exactly. So coming back to what Serena was saying before, which is like, in the victim approach, like, I'm like, the intention is to have somebody else come in and take care of something for us. Like, in the victim approach, they're really, and I was about to say there's no real intention of the victim approach, because the victim approach is kind of like objectiveless, but I think that what it is the only thing that in the victim approach that really people are focusing on, the only intent is to try and feel a little bit better than they currently do. And so that's the thing, is that because we're taught that we've taught rescuing is a good thing. So it's like, oh, look, someone's going to come in and rescue me. That's going to feel good, right? Wrong. I mean, obviously, we'll get into the fact that there might be actual emergencies in which you might need to rescue somebody. Like, that's a different thing. We're going to talk about that a little bit further on in this episode. But like, when we're talking about these sorts of dynamics, like, we genuinely believe that somebody coming in to help, a lot of the time, if we're in victim approach, we're like, oh, thank God someone else has come along, because I have no idea what to do, and maybe they can make this situation better. And that's the thing. I think that the outcome of the intention of the victim approach and the rescuer approach is, generally speaking, to try to make things better, whether it's for themselves, whether it's for somebody else. Now, you're never going to do it through that means. Like, those approaches are never going to actually make things better. Might help you, like, the best you're probably going to get is momentary hope that things are going to feel better, and a momentary, well, this doesn't feel quite as sucky. Oh shit. Like, that's what's going to happen. It's like, oh yeah, oh no, actually this doesn't feel really that much better at all. It's just a different form of sucky at this point, and it still feels pretty sucky. And for a lot of people, we don't know what it is to feel good. Our society and our culture is so riddled with problems and anxiety and stress and issues that just having a point where it doesn't feel as sucky for a moment, normally, like, for most people, it's like, yes, I've made it. This is how life is supposed to be. Woohoo! Like, I'm living life high. No, it just doesn't suck as bad as it used to for a second. It can be so much better than that, but most of us don't have an experience of that. And because of that, we live for these moments where it's like a little bit less sucky. It's a little bit less like, oh, it doesn't feel quite as shit as it did yesterday. Yay.
And depending on how sucky it is, like, that could be like a yay, but
right,
in reality it's still just a
sucky.
Yay. Like, yeah.
And that's the thing, is that, and this is not to take away, like, and we're actually in the process of putting together a brand new program. Very excited. So if you are like struggling, if you're struggling to cope, if you're in crisis mode, if you're low on capacity, all of those things, And yes, if like it being a little bit less sucky than it was yesterday, that can still feel like a good thing. And it can be progress if you're moving on the trajectory in the right direction, if things are continually moving forward. But what for most of us, the cycle and the pattern that we're in, especially when we're stuck in the drama triangle, is like, oh yeah, oh, yeah, no. Like literally that's like the cycle that we're in. And what we want to do instead is start moving ourselves in a direction and on a trajectory where things start to steadily, consistently improve over time.
Other ways that the rescuer approach is harmful is in how the rescuer approach interacts with the victim approach position creates a dependency, and it reinforces the perception of powerlessness of the victim approach to a greater or lesser extent. And this inevitably leads the person in the rescuer approach position to move unconsciously or consciously, unintentionally or intentionally into the persecutor approach sooner or later. It's important to note that a lot of coaches, counselors, therapists, etc., are rescuer approaches in disguise, and that might seem surprising. They do this work as a way of helping people to try and feel good about themselves, which is a red way to meet needs. Now, you can only make sessions entire...
Or to try to meet needs.
Or to try and meet needs, yes. That word, I don't know why. It is such an important word, and I keep skipping over it. So, like, it is always to try and meet your needs in these cases. So, somebody in this role, you can only make the sessions entirely about the client, what they need and how they need it. If your needs are well met, so there are none of your own unmet needs subconsciously trying to get met through the work or how it is conducted, and the extent to which the sessions can be completely about the client, dramatically impact in how effective they can be. So basically, if most of these people are bringing their own stuff in, whether they realize it or not, into these sessions, it's very rare that you see it to be purely about the client, because they're trying to get the coaches, counselors, whoever, don't know how to meet their own needs and are trying to get their needs met in these red ways to through their work, which I mean, see how that can be problematic.
And I am case A of this situation. Like when I first started doing the work that I do, I was complete rescuer approach. And it was, and again, we get taught in our culture, it's good to want to help others. And it's yeah, but I'm trying to help others to feel good about me, which means I need other people to not be in a good place so that I can help them, so I can feel good about me. But if I do help them, then they're no longer going to need me. So I no longer have a way to feel good about myself. So I need them to not be in a good place. It's a really fucked up, when you kind of get to it on the grand scheme of things. And it's interesting because as I said, this is how I started off. Thank God I started to do this work. And it's funny, I have a friend of mine, colleague of mine, who does similar work to me. And one of the things that that used to come up in conversations between us that I was used to say is that you have to make everything about you so you can make nothing about you. And what I mean by that is as you're going through day-to-day life, you have to make everything an opportunity to do your own work and to look for where are my triggers, where are the things I need to learn, where are my needs not being met so I can meet them for myself, so that when you are in session with a client, you can be 100% focused on what you need, and your needs aren't in there trying to be met as well. And this thing, it's not I can hear people seeing this going, really? This is what the people in these positions are doing. They don't know they're doing it. I didn't go into this field going, right, I know what's going to make me feel really good about myself is if I go and help other people, but only help them enough so they continue to need my help so I can continue to feel good about helping them. That's not what I was doing. And a lot of people, as we were saying, they genuinely have this intention to help. They I have heard so many over the years, horror stories of therapists, counselors, coaches, where when people tell me the experiences that they've had with them, I'm like, oh, they're just trying to get their needs met through this situation. It's funny. I mean, when this goes out, we recorded this a little bit before when it goes live. But at the moment on TikTok, there is a video or a series of videos that's doing the rounds about a guy who dated a therapist, not his therapist, just somebody who happened to be a therapist. And the behavior of this individual is wild. And they're like, this guy's like, I can't believe people go to this person to get help. And now that they've figured out, this person has now heard about it. She's like, you're going to ruin my career. And it's like, no, your behavior is going to ruin your career. This is how you're out there acting in the world. And the interesting thing is, this is again, because a lot of people want to go, they want to help, but they don't realize that because their own needs are unmet under the surface, they're using these sessions as a way of feeling that they're using. So let me give you some examples. So they might use their sessions where they're going to educate their client about something so that they can feel that they know stuff and that they're important, i.e. that they're valuable, as a way of trying to get their value need met. They might try and convince the client that the client is wrong about something and that they're right about something, as a way of trying to get their personal power need met. Really fucked up, by the way, really fucked up. And it may be that, like, you can see there's a difference between using this as a way of trying to get your personal power need met, and when you can see that a client is saying something because they don't maybe understand something yet, or they haven't been shown a certain perspective, or they haven't been, you can then ask questions. They can be like, okay, so what about if you viewed it like this? Have you considered this way of looking at things? Which is a way of helping somebody to kind of understand their own, get to that conclusion on their own, and help them go through the thought process so that they understand, rather than I'm going to prove that I am right and you're wrong, as a way of me getting my personal power need met. So, for example, another thing that I've seen in the behind the scenes when I've been speaking to people who are either have had these kind of therapists or coaches, or I've heard sometimes coaches talking about this, and I'm like, everything in my system, like I feel physically sick, is like they're trying to get their security need met because they need the income of their clients, which means that they can't actually help their clients solve their problems. Because, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the coach aren't sitting around going, guess what? I made this person stay another 10 sessions. But you can hear in what they're saying that actually their focus is on keeping the client. And I'm like, my job, if I'm actually doing my job as a coach, mentor, guide, my job is to get you to the point where you don't need me anymore. Now, you may want help from me, because sometimes it can be helpful to have somebody to bounce ideas off and give you advice and help you understand perspectives that you may not be able to see. But that's not because you need you. Like if I have a client that still needs me, I'm not doing my job. My objective is get to the point where you no longer need me anymore. And because you don't need me, if you want to work with me, that becomes a different dynamic. But a lot of coaches and mentors want to be needed, because it's only when they're needed that the client is going to stay. And that's how they make their income. So they need the client to stay so they get the security need met. Like, there are so many versions of this and variations of this. And as I said, like, I'm not like, I mean, trust me, if I heard a coach who was saying, guess what, I made this, I would be like, I would have some words to say. Let's just put it that way. But I can hear them like worrying about where their income is and worrying about losing clients. And I'm like, if you're focused on this, then that is the thing that is driving the things that you're saying in session, not what is for the good of the client. And what for the good of the client may be to be done with you, because there are times when, okay, sometimes someone reaches a certain point. It's like, okay, it's actually the best thing for you to go away now and integrate the things that we've talked about and to practice them. And then if you want more help with it, to come back and speak to me, because I want you to not be dependent on me. I want you to not be dependent on my advice. I want you to be able to make these decisions for yourself. Now, if you want some help figuring things out, that's a different thing. But this is the reason that so often these things the waters get muddied. And you end up with these people who are in a rescuer approach. And if you're in a rescuer approach, chances are you're actually in a persecutor approach. Almost the split second you start. Very rarely do you stay in the rescuer approach very long before you're over there in the persecutor approach. And a lot of the time when you have somebody who is a coach, mentor, therapist, whatever, you're dealing with people who are vulnerable. There's a reason that they are coming to you, because they are vulnerable, because they're struggling in some way. And the most important thing is to cultivate trust. If you are unintentionally and unconsciously using the sessions that this person is paying you for to get your needs met, you are undermining that trust. Now, as I said, they don't know this. Like, I had no clue this is what I was doing when I first started. I just genuinely thought I was helping people. And it was only when I went through this process, I was like, fuck. damn it. More work for me to do. But that's the reason, like, if you're in one of these kind of roles, if you're in one of these kinds of positions, it is so important that you take responsibility for doing your work first and foremost, and consistently, that you continue to do your work, because life be lifing, and life is going to come with some stuff that is going to need processing and healing and dealing with. And if you don't do that work yourself, it's so easy to slip into habits without realizing it, where all of a sudden, oh, look, this person is doing a good job. That's because of me. That's my way of getting my value need met. And the interesting thing is, like, when I first started doing the work that I do, is that it actually backfired against me, because I was so dependent on the people who I was coaching to make progress and heal in order for me to feel good about myself. I started taking over responsibility for their outcomes. And I remember, like, there was one person who just did not implement anything. We talked about it, and what I was giving them was good and valuable. And they were just not doing anything with it. They were not implementing it. And I remember feeling like, should I give them a refund? Because I'm like, I'm obviously not doing my job if they aren't getting results. And it's a person from my past who did not bring much to it and took quite a lot from it, said something to me. And this is probably the only thing of value I can take from this interaction. And they said to me, if you bought a book and you didn't read it, would you believe that the author owed you a refund? And I'm like, well, no, because I didn't read it. And I'm like, no. I'm like, okay. So if you bought a book and you read it and you didn't implement anything that was in it, and so you didn't get any benefit from reading the book, would the author owe you a refund? And I'm like, well, no, that's on me. And I'm like, aha.
I see what you did there.
See it now. see where we're going with this. And it was a good analogy on the surface, and logically that made sense. But until I got to the point where my needs were not, like, my value need was not caught up in the success and results of my clients, that I could let go of that sense of responsibility. And with that sense of responsibility, there came a pressure. Like, I was like, come on, like I need my clients to do well here, because I got to feel good about myself. But then I also need my clients to stay clients, because otherwise then I don't have any other way of still feeling good about myself. I mean, like, it's really fucked up, like, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. And again, I wasn't consciously aware of that. I wasn't having these thoughts. I just thought, I'm trying to help people. I really want them to be better. I really want them to improve their lives. And therefore, that's why I'm so invested. It makes me a good coach. It makes me good at what I do. No, it makes me somebody who is completely dependent on other people to get my needs met. And now, if someone comes along and I know that what I deliver is, and that was also the thing, because I was early on in my coaching career, I didn't realize and recognize the value I was bringing. I didn't acknowledge that myself, which also was part of the problem. Now, if someone comes along and they have a session with me, and I know I'm giving them valuable stuff, and they get nothing out of it, I'm like, that's a choice that they have made, because they've chosen not to do anything with that information. It doesn't in any way make the information less valid. And obviously, it's also my responsibility to make sure that I can communicate that in ways that people can understand, and different people learn in different ways. All of that is stuff that I do and I take on board. If I have done that and someone doesn't get anything out of it, I'm very blessed to have had lots of people go through this, and I've seen the results that happen when people implement it. So I know when someone, and also if someone's like, oh no, I haven't managed to do anything with that this week, I'm like, okay, that's your choice. Let's move on to then, let's do this. What are we going to do this week? And those are the clients who, I mean, I've fired clients that are not putting the work in, because it's a waste of their money and it's a waste of my time. And I don't, like, for me, if they're not going to get results, they're going to be out there saying, well, I worked with Claire and didn't get any results. They're not going to say, because I did fuck all with it. They're going to be like, yeah, she's obviously not that great, because they're going to want to feel good about themselves, and it makes sense to blame me. So it doesn't do me any good to have somebody who's not doing the stuff out there, because it's not going to work for me. It's not going to work for them. It's a lose all around. Let's just move on. And I would rather work with clients who really want to do this and they want to put the work in. And it's really beautiful to see when people take that choice and they empower themselves to do something with it. but I'm not going to take that on as a failure in myself if they choose not to. So it's, yeah, I mean, this is something I could talk for a long time about, because I see it a lot. And I said, there are so many, it's part of the reason that I don't believe that coaching is a good thing. I don't believe that therapy is a good thing. I don't believe that counseling is a good thing. I believe that you can have great coaches and great therapists, but not all of them are. And in fact, I would say, in my experience and from the experience of listening to clients, what I've seen is that there are more people out there who are in rescue approach than there are who are actually doing their own work to the extent at which they are truly supporting their clients, and there's nothing else happening within those sessions. Now, obviously, I've only got knowledge of a certain number, but that's my experience and what I've heard and the interactions and conversations I've had.
Well, or people in those roles that are actually walking their talk, because I've known many people who are in those types of roles, and they give the advice and they give the suggestions to their clients, and then you see their real life and you're like, well, like, are you doing that? Like, because you have these, I mean, adulting's hard. We say it very often. It takes a lot out of you. Like, we're all in different places. And if the person who is giving you advice, who's coaching you, who's giving you therapy, isn't in a good place themselves, like, it's when you take a step back, it's really interesting, because especially since I've come into this field and body of work, seeing some of the more well-known people and then going behind the curtain just a little bit and being like, well, wait a minute here. Like,
yes.
There's so much masking in the industry as a whole, and you don't get like, you know, we're not perfect, and we are very proud to say we are not perfect. We fuck up. Sometimes our lives that look a little more like a shit show than, you know, like you know, well done production, but you know, that's life. And it's like, you get that. Like, it's there's,
and yeah, I think a lot of the time, like, when you're in that, if you're walking your talk, shit's gonna happen in life. Like, nobody, like, it doesn't matter how, like, I think sometimes people think because of what we do and what we teach that our lives are always immaculate and perfect and easy, and it's like, oh, no, my friend, we're still living in a late stage capitalistic society that has a lot of systemic issues. And even if we didn't have that, we're still going to have, like, other people are going to come into and out of our lives. There are going to be, I mean, we've both lived through natural disasters. I mean, shit's going to happen. And it's like, how you are able to deal with that is about how you are doing your work and how you are taking care of your needs, to put it in the context of what we teach. And like, you don't have to call it meeting your needs, as long as you're doing the things. It can help because you go, oh, these are needs and I'm actually doing this thing to meet them. Oh, that makes logical sense. But like, you don't have to call it that as long as you're doing the stuff that's actually going to be making the difference. But I think a lot of people, they, and again, that's a good rescuer. There's a very common rescuer habit, which is like, I'm going to tell you what to do over here, but I'm spinning out in victim approach over here. And there's two problems with that. The first thing is, one, that you're obviously not in a position and a place where you can give good advice based on, I know this works at the very least for me because I'm doing it myself. So that's, I mean, and one of the things that used to make me so angry is the number of money or financial coaches who are fucking struggling financially. Like, it made me so angry. I'm like, if you're going to coach about money, then you need to have done enough to be in a position where you can say, I know this is at the very least worked for me. Even if I've not helped anybody else with it, I know that these things can work because I'm doing them and I have creative results through doing it. As I've always said, I am my first client when it comes to the needs work. I wouldn't say Serena's my second client. I had a few before she came along. But she's probably the my second client in terms of like exposure to what it is that we do and understanding of what we do and the amount of coaching that she's had from me in this. I would say she's probably there's a 1-2 of me and Serena in terms of applying the work that we do. And I know that it works for me and for Serena and for all the other people that we've helped doing this with, because we've seen it work. So that's the first thing. And the second issue with it is that if you're not implementing the work yourself, you don't get to see where the issues are with it. Like, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate when, like I said, I literally this few days ago created this new shape, this new model, and I sent it to Serena and I sent it to a couple of other people who know the work well enough. And someone came back and gave me some feedback, and they were like, oh, like when you're creating new work, I don't want like to give you feedback because I don't want you to feel like I'm criticizing. And I'm like, no, tell me, like, let me know, because if I know the things that aren't working with it, that means I can refine it and I can develop it and I can look at where the nuance is in it to make sure it is even more effective and even more powerful than it would be otherwise. And if you don't know where the potential potholes are, if you don't know where the potential dead ends are because you haven't walked it yourself, you can't help other people through those moments where it's like, oh, hold on a second, this is an issue with this content. Okay, we need to adapt the content and evolve it and move it and update it and change it. Serena will tell you how infuriatingly frequently I do that, because every time I learn something new, or every time somebody like asks a question, or every time someone comes up with a challenge, I'm like, oh, this needs to be developed further because we need to be able to incorporate this and we need to allow for this. But also when people they get to a point where it's not an issue with the content, that's just a barrier that everyone has to jump over at some point because that's part of the process. If you haven't gone over that barrier yourself, how the fuck are you going to help somebody else go through it? Like, I can't remember why I was, somebody was saying about, they were trying to, they were asking somebody how to do something. And they were person saying, oh, well, you do this, and then you just do it. And they're like, that's not explaining how to do something. It's like saying like you're on a horse and you're coming up to a jump, and you say that, and the instructions are you come up to the jump, you jump over the jump, and you ride off on the other side of it. That's not the correct thing. Now, I don't know horse jumping, so I would imagine that there are things that you probably need to do with the reins. There are things that you need to do with your feet. There are things that you need to do in terms of your body motion that are going to help that process. But if you don't break down those, if you've never jumped a horse before, like I give you exhibit A, I've never jumped a horse before, so I don't know what those things are to be able to help somebody understand how to jump a horse over a fence, a gate, a horse jump, or what have you, because I've never done it. So I can't break that down. I can imagine there might be things, and I'm like, I'm guessing probably you're going to want to do this, probably you're going to want to do that. But like it brings to mind, I went on a horse ride with my family years ago, and it was actually in Florida, and we were coming around this bend, and in the middle of the track there was a dead snake that was basically curled up in the middle of the track. And my mum's horse, my sister was on the horse with her, my mum's horse was deadly afraid of snakes, and her instinct was to pull on the reins. Unfortunately, when you pull on the reins, it tends to make a horse go backwards. We just turned a corner. There was swampland behind us. And the woman at the front just kept going, loosen up, honey, as in like loosen up the reins. And the guy in front of me just turned around and went, kick it. And my mum like kicked her feet in and went flying off down the thing. Now, the reason was my mum didn't know what to do in that situation. How do you get around what your body instinctively does in a situation and what you actually need to do to overcome it are two different things. And unless you have been in that situation, you've got a person who is leading the people in that situation they've never dealt with a horse that's scared of a snake and a snake that's on the ground. How do you get the horse to go around it? You force it to go fast past it. You give it a little nudge in the ribs, and that's what gets it to kick forward. But if you've never done that, you might be able to make some guesses, but you're never going to be able to break it down, which is going to stop you from being able to actually help people when they're in those situations. And it's no different when you're talking about emotional, mental, somatic work, any of those sorts of things. If you haven't done it yourself, if you've never had to go up to that point of resistance or the challenge and figured out how to go around it, over it, through it, underneath it, work with it, dance with it, whatever is required, you're never going to be able to help somebody else with it. Mm-hmm. So little mini tangent there, but I thought it was important to say. So anyway, what is pinballing when we talk about the drama triangle? We've already talked about this a little bit, but a common pattern when you're in the drama triangle is what we call pinballing between the positions, where you're moving rapidly between the victim approach, persecutor approach, and rescue approach. Right? So that we talk about it, like the reason that there's that ping, 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 because it's like, imagine if you've ever used a pinball machine, that's what it sounds like, where the ball's like bouncing quickly from one to the other, and there's like ding, 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 ding from the bells when they do it, and the lights are flashing. So let's use the example of an argument. So we're going to imagine that Serena and I are in an argument. I don't think you and I have ever had an argument, have we? I mean, we've had moments where we've disagreed about something, but I don't remember a single.
Not that lasted more than the moment we were in it, because we.
Yeah. But even when I'm thinking about like an actual argument where it's like the kind of like, that's not like, we've had moments where we've disagreed and things have been a little scrunchy, but I don't. Anyway, so if we were to have an argument, this is what it might look like. So say I'm in the persecutor approach. So I do something that negatively impacts Serena. So Serena would be in the victim approach to me. And because Serena's needs are unmet and they've been compromised, Serena reacts by shouting at me. When Serena shouts at me, all of a sudden she jumps into the persecutor approach. I drop into the victim approach. And again, it's very important to say that these are like, we want to make sure we're creating a distinction between what is actually happening, which we're going to get to in our shape in a few episodes time, and the approaches that we're taking. The reason that we end up pinging between these different approaches is because culturally we are taught to be in the drama triangle. That is the way that we are conditioned into doing things. So we're almost always in the drama triangle in some way, shape or form, and we end up just pinging between them. Oops, a little bit hand happy. My microphone just got pinged off to the side. And so while we are talking about like if Serena is shouting at me, yeah, there's an actual impact to me by that happening. And what's happening in this situation, because we're both in the drama triangle, when Serena moves into the shouting approach, she's doing that because being in the victim approach doesn't feel good, and she's jumping into the persecutor approach to feel better about it. And because I'm now the person who I'm going to look at Serena and go, oh, look, she's doing this to me. Poor me. I'm going to feel anxiety, all the core things. I'm going to have dropped into the victim approach with this. Now, if I then shout back because my needs are unmet and being shouted at has triggered my unmet needs, all of a sudden I become persecutor approach. Serena drops into victim approach. Then I feel bad for shouting at Serena. So Serena's in the victim approach. And I try to comfort Serena to feel better about herself. So I then move into the rescue approach. And because of my unmet needs, I then start spiraling, focusing on how bad I feel about what I did to Serena. So I drop into victim approach in that moment, like, oh my God, I'm so bad. I'm such a terrible person, blah, blah, blah. And then I engage with sympathy-seeking victim approach behaviors to try to get Serena to feel bad for me, even though I'm the one that negatively impacted her in the first place. Then Serena gets pulled into the victim approach because they feel bad about Serena feels bad about how bad I feel about how the situation has played out. So Serena then moves into the rescuer position and I move into the victim approach position. Like that is just like 30 seconds of an interaction. How many different
and one that's pretty common. Like yes,
absolutely. And this is like what tends to happen is like is that we like, oh God, like what she's so out of line. She's like, poor me. Like this is awful what's happening to me right now. Like a victim approach position. And then it's like, how dare she shout me? I want to shout, like, I'm going to tell her what for. Like, I'm going to because I want to have the power in the situation. That's the persecutor approach. So all these are just a few examples of how this dynamic can play out between individuals. And we will try and create some more in future episodes. There are so many more though. And there are different layers of nuance depending on the circumstances and the relationships involved. So for example, if it was a situation where Serena and I are shouting at each other because I've done something to hurt somebody else, then there becomes another person involved in the situation. And that's when we end up with lots of persecutor approach, victim approach, rescuer approach, ding, 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 ding. I mean, like if you like pinball sounds and being exhausted, drama triangle is awesome. Other than that, not really so much.
Yeah, I don't suggest it. And it's like Claire said, like we normally talking about a victim, a persecutor in this triangle, basically. And it can be multiple people, which then just adds a whole lot more mess to the messiness. So just didn't want you to think this is just between like one person or two people. Like there can be multiple players and multiple people in each role, which yeah you thought it was confusing before. It's also important to note that you can be engaging in all these behaviors with yourself. So you can adopt the persecutor approach with how you treat yourself. You can adopt the victim approach with how you respond. And then you can also adopt the rescuer approach and try to rescue yourself from your own poor choices. For an example, if you're adopting the persecutor approach with yourself when you engage in negative self-talk, so when your inner critic is active, you're adopting
that's an example of when you are adopting the persecutor approach. So
when your inner critic is active.
Yes. Yeah. So when your inner critic is active and you're engaging in negative self-talk, that's where you're adopting the persecutor approach with yourself.
You're adopting the victim approach with yourself if you engage in self-sabotage and believe there is nothing you can do to stop yourself from self-sabotaging because you believe that's just how you are. You're adopting the rescuer approach if you engage with toxic, false, or forced positivity as a strategy to try to make yourself feel better about the situation without doing anything to actually resolve it. The list that we have provided of examples of behaviors that fall into the victim approach, persecutor approach, and rescuer approach are not exhaustive by any means. There are many more manifestations of the behaviors that show up from this dynamic. Almost all, if not all, of the behaviors that are poor, toxic, or associated with issues happen because we're engaging with the victim approach, persecutor approach, or rescuer approach. And because all of these behaviors are the root of the victim are at root a victim approach, they are all a disempowered approach to try to meet our own needs. So it's important to remember we need to be compassionate about our past drama triangle behaviors. It can sometimes be difficult for us to own that we're operating from one of the positions in the drama triangle. I had a serious problem with that when we first broached this shape. I was like, oh, no. Oh, maybe. So we tend to resist naming that we've been in these positions because we don't want to perceive ourselves as being wrong, harmful, weak, or behaving poorly, even unintentionally or unconsciously. We know deep down that these are not helpful ways of meeting our needs or relating to ourselves or others, so we don't want to be doing them. So we try to convince ourselves that we are not. The truth is that the only way to get to where we want to be, the empowerment ecosystem, more on this later, is to first name and own where we currently are. If we aren't honest about this, then it makes it much harder for us to navigate through to where we really want to be. We also tend to judge or criticize ourselves for being in the other positions of the drama triangle, but we have been conditioned by our society into being in the victim approach in our culture. For most of us, it's all we've ever known, all we've ever been taught. It's the air we've been breathing our whole lives, which means that it's important to extend compassion to ourselves for the fact that we've been operating in this dynamic and from this dynamic. For most of us, we don't know any other way of behaving or relating to ourselves and others, while subconsciously trying to meet our unmet needs to the best of our ability. So it's important that we are gentle with ourselves as we consider how we have behaved in the past and avoid self-criticism and judgment wherever we can. We did the best we could with the information and resources that we had available to us at the time, and now we want to unlearn the behaviors that really aren't serving us. We are now learning that there are different ways of approaching the meeting of our needs that don't compromise or harm ourselves, others, or the needs ecosystem, our society and communities. So now we want to apply these new ways we are learning of approaching our needs to make different choices that meet our needs better and also align more with the kind of people that we really want to be and the kind of communities and society that we want to be a part of.
Yeah, it's also important to recognize that a lot of us have been objectively victimized at various points in our lives, as many of us have neglect and abuse in our past, and combined with our drama triangle conditioning and not knowing another way to relate to this victimization, this has often led to us being in the victim approach. In these cases, it's even more important to come to this realization with a lot of self-compassion, because often the victim inside of us has not been well supported in getting their needs met. Then another layer of judgment and shame gets put on ourselves when we realize we've been relating to this experience from a victim approach approach, which compromises our needs even further. Instead, we want to have compassion for that part of us and to learn how to approach healing from that experience in a way that feels more empowering to us. As we said before, there is a huge difference between being actually victimized and taking a victim approach to what is happening in our lives. As a culture, we tend to confuse and conflate actual victimhood with being in a victim approach or mindset. Just because we've been the victim of other people's behavior, of situations like systemic issues like racism, sexism, classism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., doesn't mean to say we have to be in the victim approach or the drama triangle. We can name that we've been victimized as a part of the an empowered approach to seeking accountability, justice, healing, change, or other responses to being a victim. Being a victim doesn't mean that we're weak, nor does it reflect in any way on our value, strength, or character. Being a victim only ever reflects poorly on the character of the person who has negatively impacted our needs through their action or inaction. It's important to realize that it's how we choose to respond to being a victim that can be either disempowering or empowering to us and to others around us. Whatever our past and whatever our experience, it's important to navigate this understanding with a lot of self-compassion and gentleness, with the intention to simply learn new ways to behave that serve us better. So I just want to also say this is something we kind of added in quickly at the end here, because I had a conversation with somebody last week and I was like, hold on, I think we might need to mention something here, which is that sometimes a situation does require intervention because it is an emergency. So what I mean by that is that sometimes you do need to rescue someone from harm in the short term without being able to go through the full process of how to come from one of the approaches that are in the empowerment ecosystem. So, for example, you might need to push somebody out the way of a car. You want to help them if they slipped and are about to fall down a severe drop, maybe stepping in front of them to stop them from falling down a hole they haven't seen or noticed. I was having this conversation with somebody and I was like, I don't want people to get the message that rescuing people at all times is a bad thing. Like, taking the rescuer approach is not the best way of approaching things in our lives, but actually rescuing somebody when they're in harm's way, that is a very different situation. I can imagine somebody like hanging off a cliff, like holding a rope, like just hanging on by a thread and coming up and saying, oh, sorry, buddy, I found out that rescuing's a bad thing. Bye. Like, that's not what we're talking about here.
Thank you for taking the content to heart. And no.
Yes. Rescuer approach. There is another approach in which you can objectively rescue people from objective harm and still coming from an empowering situation. So there are almost always going to be emergency exceptions to the ways that we would like to do things. And in situations like this, we might not have time to fully go through the thought processes that we want to. And so, I mean, you see a car coming and they're about to hit someone, you're like, right, am I in creator approach? Am I making sure that, like, which triangle am I? I don't think this is rescue approach, but what if I was doing, like, you don't have time to do that. But there are some things that can help. And one of the things is to consistently support your own needs always. Like, that's always going to be a base level. This is going to be helpful in all situations across the board. And the other thing, which we're going to kind of get into in the next few episodes, is starting to view people not as a victim who need your help, but as just somebody who you're helping out in that moment, not because they need your help. Like, if there's a car coming towards someone, now the chances are they are, like, if they saw the car as well, they're going to get themselves out of the way of it. If you need to interact, it's probably because they haven't seen it or something like that. But it's not because they can't do it for themselves. It's because you're just helping in the situation because it's an emergency. And then the other thing is, like, as soon as the emergency is over, even, you can check in with them. Like, did you cross any boundaries by doing the thing that you did? Are they okay? Do they need any other support from you or others? And you can apologize for not being able to ask consent or permission for the thing that you did. Like, go through the apology blueprint. Like, go back and listen to that episode if you haven't listened to it already. But it's like, if there wasn't an emergency and you just shoved somebody as hard as you could, chances are that's going to cross some boundaries, some, like, actual physical boundaries that you may have hurt them and what have you. It's okay to apologize within the context of that situation after the fact. Now, if somebody you're doing it, that would be a situation in which an apology would be required. If you do it and you shove them as hard as you can, because if you didn't, then a car was going to hit them. Yes, they may still appreciate the fact that you got them out the way of the car, and you may still want to apologize. Like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, I shoved you really hard back there. Like, I was doing it because I wanted you to stay safe. And still, if that hurt you, I'm really sorry. Or if I shocked you or what have you. And you can then in those situations also think about the other options that might be better for you to draw on next time you're in a similar kind of situation. That you're intervening to stop the immediate harm. When the emergency is over, you can then figure out how you want to move into the empowerment ecosystem and move into those approaches moving forward. It's important to remember, as I said, that the reason that most of us are existing in one of these positions in the drama triangle is because of our social and societal conditioning. We are taught to be more red towards the red end of the spectrum in the way of meeting our needs. We're taught to be in the red triangle. We see it all the time. We see it in our families, in our friendships, in our relationships, in our work environments. We see it in the media. We see it in politics. We see it on TV. We see it in film. We see it on social media all the time. A lot of us will do anything possible to avoid being in the victim approach or the persecutor approach position. Like we'll be like we don't want to be in the victim approach, and we know persecutor approach, that's not really a good idea. Like that's frowned upon by society. So those of us with some kind of internal moral compass who want to do the right thing will tend towards the rescuer position, believing that they're doing the right thing, without realizing that's going to do harm. And again, like it's okay to go, I didn't know better and now I do. Like extend yourself compassion for not knowing any better than this. And instead now looking at, okay, now we know a better way of doing things. Well, we don't quite yet. But in the next episode, we are going to start diving into the empowerment ecosystem and how we can start to shift these unsupportive dynamics from the drama triangle that most of us have been engaging with for most of our lives, and start to look at how can we start to do things in more empowering ways. Anything you want to jump in with before we finish up?
I'm good.
We've done a lot today, but as Serena said earlier, the exciting part comes next. So we're going to be back next week where we're going to start looking at the empowerment ecosystem and the most important part of the empowerment ecosystem to get you shifting out of the drama triangle. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will see you again next time. Between now and then, remember to stay safe, to take care of yourself and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and give us a written review, as it will help more people find us.
And remember, most of us go into the victim approach with a genuine intention to help without realizing how harmful it can be. But there is a better way, and we're going to be coming to that very soon.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.